Vidhammer Fantasy.
Welcome back to Vidhammer. I'm Spudlow, and in this video I'll be going over our first weekly game of 2014. I'm taking the Skaven and going up against Patrick, who's working out what army he wants to play in the tournament next month. And wouldn't you know it, he brought the Ogres. Since we're trying to prep for a Crucible 3, we decided to roll for one of their scenarios at random and got Magic Flux. In this game, you get bonus points for killing opposing spellcasters and having a caster in your opponent's deployment zone at the end of the game. Additionally, during each magic phase, a caster will get a backlash for each spell where he rolls a double of whatever turn it currently is. However, your opponent can still attempt to dispel, and if they decline, you can throw more dispel dice to dispel your backlash, if you choose. Additional bonus points are awarded for dispelling a backlash in this way. Wanting to get as close to the tournament environment that we could, we also decided to use random special terrain elements since I know we're going to encounter all kinds of crazy stuff next month. What we end up with is a Cimmerian quicksand that eliminates monsters, monstrous infantry, and chariots that fail dangerous terrain tests. A blessed bulwark portrayed by the long green moose turd in the lower right. A hill, which is an anvil of Vol, giving any model within 6 inches magical flaming attacks. A tall white wizard's tower, which grants the closest caster within 3 inches the Lore Master attribute for his chosen lore of magic. And a mystical charnel pit at the top that makes all units within 6 inches suffer -1 to their leadership. Bonus effects for the undead, but neither of us have any of those. I win the roll for board edge and go for the left side, thinking that the closer I can be to that regen nullifying hill, the better. I know how much ogres love their troll guts. I start out with a simple unit of clan rats, and he puts down a single saber tusk. Sensing that the stalling game could prove quite important, I put down my own unit of giant rats. He puts down another saber tusk, so I do more rats, and he does another saber tusk. I go for my next most useless unit by putting down the rat ogres, keeping them close enough to the center, and he throws down his first unit of bulls. My storm vermin have an obvious position, and I keep them back enough so that a warp fire thrower can go in front. He follows with his first unit of Mournfang down below the house. I place my cannons as he puts his other Mournfang down, so I put my Doom Wheel up at the top, thinking that it's relatively safe as a flanker at this point. His last unit of bulls go down behind his Mournfang at the top, so I throw my slaves down there to jam up things as much as I can around that tower. He's down to his characters at this point. He's got a Tyrant that has +2 attacks and a 4+ armor save and a 4+ ward save. A Bruiser BSB with the standard of Discipline, so as long as it's in the same unit as the General, his Inspiring Presence will have a leadership of 10. Finally, he has a Slaughtermaster that ends up with, wait for it, Spine Marrow, Toothcracker, Bullgorger, and Trollguts. I go ahead and put my Hell Pit down, but not before I break it off of its stand. Then I do my characters, with the Warlord going with the Rat Ogres, the BSB with the Storm Vermin, a level 1 Warlock Engineer in with the Slaves that has the Doom Rocket and the Energy Condenser who gets the Scorch spell. And my last 2 casters go with the Clan Rats. There's a level 2 Engineer with a Dispel Scroll that has Warp Lightning and Death Frenzy, and a Grey Seer with a Power Scroll that ends up with Crack's Call, Wither, Blessed with Filth, and Pestilent Breath. Finally, I put the Gutter Runners down at the top of his battle line with a nice Saber Tusk right in front of them. Other start-a-game elements give the Grey Seer 3 Warpstone tokens, and the Storm Vermin get Hatred from the Skaven Brew effect. Another chance to get a good combo if I can get it off. He has the +1, but I still end up winning the first turn roll, and I start off with the Doom Wheel and Hell Pit, moving up on either side of the Charnel Pit. I fly the Rat Darts out as well, giving him something that he can either try and charge or let it get in his way. Since I'm anticipating the Clan Rats turning into a bunker, I go ahead and move my BSB in there for a little safety. Then I almost forget to move the Gutter Runners, but not quite. See, I'm learning. Our first magic phase is 12 versus 5 thanks to some channels, and I'm a little bummed. Since I didn't move my clan rats up, I'm not even within range of any of the good stuff. I could cast Death Frenzy and Blessed with Filth, but they aren't going to do any good at this point, so I go for Scorch on the lower Mournfang and use 4 dice. I roll double 1s, which gives me a miscast, so he decides not to dispel it. Not wanting any of my casters sucked into the void on the first turn, again, I go ahead and use my 5 dice to dispel my own miscast. A bit of a waste to use 9 dice for a spell that does a whopping 0 wounds, but that's what happened. I use the last 3 for Death Frenzy since I've got nothing better to do, but he goes ahead and dispels it. Over to shooting, where things are really about to heat up. Starting off, the gutter runners aim for that lonely, vulnerable Sabertusk and get 1 wound. I could even see the model with his paws to his ears going. Then the Doom Wheel has to restrain from shooting into the Abomination. Don't know how I missed that oversight in putting things down. The Doom Wheel doesn't need line of sight, it just hits the closest unit, and multiplying to D3 wounds on 3 bolts has the potential of killing that thing in 1 good hit. It was even better since the Doom Wheel was within 6 inches of the Charnel Pit, so it had to pass its leadership on a 6. Thankfully, I got it, but I got most of my luck out of my system on this phase as we move into the Warp Lightning Cannons. The first one shoots for the upper Mournfang, since they're actually in 2 rows, but it sticks in the mud and does nothing. I roll for the second, misfire, but it just shoots off the board. That's okay, guys. I'm sure you'll do better next turn. Over to the Ogres. The central Mournfang charge the Rat Dart, which flees after the Sabertusk do a little early move. He fails to redirect into the Warp Fire Thrower and ends up moving 4 inches. His other units move up with the lower Bulls, getting his Slaughtermaster within 3 inches of the Wizard's Tower. The Cats park themselves in front of the Hell Pit and the Doom Wheel, with the central one just doing a flyby on the giant rats, maybe just showing off his stripes. And now it's time to do some good with that Wizard's Tower as we head into the magic phase, where it's 6 versus 6. And he quickly realizes a small flaw in his deployment, as he's more than 12 inches away from half of his army. He uses all 6 dice for Toothcracker at the higher level, even though it will only affect the lower 2 units. He gets true irresistible force, and the Bulls end up taking 5 wounds in the backlash, but the Slaughtermaster is able to dodge, getting sucked into the void. With no shooting, we head into the second turn, where I have the Rat Ogres charge the Sabertusk, who flees, and they end up moving 3 inches. For compulsory moves, the Doom Wheel and Hell Pit are both able to make their charge distances. I know, quite unbelievable, but then again, I only needed to roll 1 on 3 dice. Then I do something quite stupid, and move my slaves a long way up towards the Mournfang, after my Rat Ogres, which hold my army general, just failed a charge. I could have had them wheel at the end of the move, which would have brought the back end closer to the Rat Ogres, but with such a long way to go for the Mournfang to charge anything else, I should have just kept them where they were. The fleeing giant rats fail to rally as the remaining ones move up to direct the Bulls. The clan rats back up and the storm vermin step up, and I remember the gutter runners. That's 2 for 2. That's some kind of record for me. Magic is 7 versus 6 this time, and I use 3 dice for Warp Lightning, which should have been Scorch since the lower engineer only had that single spell. I was originally thinking about firing at the fleeing Sabertusk, but it's leadership 4 and it's already outside of the general's range, so I shoot it at the Mournfang instead. I get true irresistible force, again, and the spell does a single wound with the backlash, putting a wound on all of my casters and taking away all of my remaining dice. I could have used Warpstone tokens to try for something, but he was sitting on 6 dispel dice, so there wasn't any point. Time for more of that awesome shooting. This time the Doom Wheel is in base contact with the Sabertusk and is able to kill it before any of that silly combat. The Gutter Runners, however, have a hefty armor save to face, and they just can't manage to get through. Then I go for the Doom Rocket, since the engineer carrying it is not long for this world. I've got a great shot down the line of the central Bulls, and I end up 1 inch over my target range, and score 8 wounds in the end. Nice job. Now for the Warp Lightning Cannons. I'm sure it's going to be awesome after such a deplorable first round. First cannon, misfire, blows up. Second cannon, misfire, blows up. Even though the warp fire thrower was within range and I didn't move it just so I could shoot, I forget about it for some reason, probably because my vision had gone red with rage at that point. In the only combat, the Hell Pit kills off the Sabertusk in impact hits, but I don't have it overrun after combat. It wasn't a sure thing, but there was a fairly good chance of being outside of the Mournfang's charge arc with that, and it ends up being a very costly oversight. Because on the Ogre's turn, the lower Mournfang charge the slaves, the Bulls charge the giant rats, and the upper Mournfang charge the Hell Pit, and they make it. And they end up within 6 inches of the hill that gives them flaming attacks. Sucks to be a Hell Pit that doesn't know how to overrun. The remaining Bulls step into the building while the remaining Sabertusk continues to flee across the swamp and takes a wound in dangerous terrain. Magic is 8 versus 5, and he rolls his first 3 for Toothcracker on the Mournfang. Knowing that the Warlock Engineer with the Dispel Scroll isn't going to be alive much longer, I go ahead and roll all my dice to dispel this, thinking that all of his dice are going to go for Troll Guts. I get an irresistible dispel on this one. Then he rolls his last 5 for Troll Guts, which I'm able to dispel with a scroll. In combat, the Central Bulls kill the giant rats with their big charge impact hits, and overrun 6 inches. Then in the lower combat, the Mournfangs do 4 wounds in impact hits. The Slave Paw Leader issues a challenge and gets a wound, but it gets saved, and then he dies. Almost a hero. The rest of the slaves aren't able to do anything against the 2+ armor saves. Then they take several more to the normal attacks of the ogres, mounts, and stomps. I'm steadfast as all get up, but being outside of the general's range by 1 inch still puts me at needing a 5 for my break test, which they fail and explode. At this point, the Mournfang begin to damage my calm. Back to the upper combat, the Abomination takes 3 wounds in flaming magical impact hits, then it's able to kill off the single Mournfang with his lethal Sweet Lovin' that they don't take too kindly to, and decide to finish him off. They restrain from the overrun and turn towards the action. It's a very tough choice on the 3rd turn for me, but I decide not to make any charges. I looked at my Storm Vermin versus his Ogres, and I felt like I wouldn't do enough wounds to kill off 4 of his Ogres with the limited frontage of my Storm Vermin charging the flank. And he would get a good amount of attacks and stomps if his characters slide over to fight me, so he can potentially end up winning the combat, or at least making it very close to the point to where he would pass his rerollable break test. If my Storm Vermin are stuck against them, and they're able to reform amid defeat and bring in the Mournfang on the next round, they would all die. So instead, I have the Doom Wheel skirt the edge of the Carnal Pit, and the Gutter Runners move away so it will fire at the Mournfang. The Rat Ogres go ahead and take a big step back, but I should have tested to restrain since they were frenzied. The Storm Vermin back up as well, just to make it harder for the Mournfang to potentially overrun into them. My magic phase is 7 versus 4, and I use the first 3 for Wither on the Bulls and get another glorious, true irresistible force. But luckily, only 2 clan rats die, along with a wound on the BSB. But I do lose the rest of my magic dice, and again I could use the Warpstone tokens, but there's still 4 dice he has to dispel anything I could try. For shooting, a single Gutter Runner ends up in range of the Central Bulls and manages a single wound. Then the Doom Wheel lights up the Mournfang for 3 wounds. Unfortunately, that ends up killing off one of the models, and the Mournfangs are no longer blocked by the giant rats. Something I need to think about in the future. Always put your redirector in the center of your enemy. Finally, the moment the Warp Fire Thrower has waited its whole life for. The perfect flank shot on a multi-wound unit. It hits 7 ogres and winds up doing 15 wounds, killing off 5 ogres altogether. Now it's back to the ogres, where the upper Mournfang charge the Warp Fire Thrower, who stands and shoots for back-to-back glory, and it's able to kill off 1 and take the last one down to a single wound. Another great job, but it's not going to be enough to save your life. The central bulls charge the clan rats, and I wish I had enough room to run, but I still probably wouldn't do it. The lower Mournfang try and join the fun, but they end up a little short. Otherwise, bulls pop out of the building, and the fleeing Sabertusk buys itself one more turn. For another display of magical awesomeness, the ogres end up with 5 dice versus 4 and go for Toothcracker at the higher level, since the central bulls will benefit and he gets irresistible force, with 2 wounds going to the bulls and the Slaughtermaster getting sucked into the void. In combat, the awesome Warp Fire Thrower accepts the expedient retirement plan dished out by the Mournfang as it overruns into the Storm Vermin. In the large combat, 2 clan rats die to impact hits. Then I realized that when I put my Warlord in the unit, I didn't put the command elements of the unit in front. I end up keeping the formation the way it is because Hard Knocks is the quickest way to learn, but I should have been able to have the Grey Seer and BSB in the second row, where they wouldn't be able to be attacked until the Warlord was dead. As it is, I have the Warlord issue a challenge and his Tyrant accepts, as we're both really curious to see how this one goes. He tries to have his Tyrant drink his Potion of Speed to be at equal initiative, but since I didn't move my Grey Seer, I don't let him drink his potion. He can do that next turn. My Warlord puts a single wound on the Tyrant, and I save an incoming wound as well. Then the Bonebreaker plays with his own bone, but doesn't do anything else. In the rest of the combat, the Warlock Engineer manages a single wound, and the rest of the clan rats don't do squat. The ogres take out the Grey Seer, and only 2 more clan rats in normal attacks, and 3 more in stomps. I lose the combat, but stay steadfast and pass the break test. Back to my turn, and I have the rat ogres charge into the combat, hoping to even the score a bit, and in a crazy last-ditch hope to delay, the gutter runners charge the flank of the lower bulls. I know it's crazy, but what else have they got to do? Death charge in lieu of boredom, I guess. They both make it, and the Doom Wheel makes a valiant attempt to get somewhere useful, so much so that the giant rats have to turn about and get out of range, and they were lucky to do so since they had to pass a leadership test of 5 in order to march, thanks to the Charnel Pit. Magic this time is 8 versus 4, and I have my only remaining caster, the only one in the game actually, use 6 dice to go for Death Frenzy on the Storm Vermin, and he gets irresistible force. You'd expect him to get sucked into the void, but he just loses the spell and his remaining dice in the backlash. The Doom Wheel acts as my only shooting phase and takes care of the lone Mournfang. I think the Storm Vermin were a little cheesed off by that move, but they'll get over it. Our challenge continues in the combat phase, and he said he was drinking the potion at the start of my turn, so the Tyrant goes simultaneous with my Warlord, but ends up rolling 5 ones to hit and fails to wound, while the Warlord ticks him for 1 more, and the Bone Boy just does his own thing. For normal attacks, the clan rats dish out another load of squat, but at least the rat ogres manage 5. The bulls put 2 wounds on the rat ogres and another 5 on the clan rats, then 2 more in stomps. With the +1 from the rat ogre's charge, the combat ends up dead even, with musicians on both sides. In the other combat, the gutter runners actually manage 2 wounds that get past the armor, and it takes away the final ogre in his 3rd rank. He's only got 6 attacks back, and manages 1 wound and 1 more from the stomp. With the charge and the flank, I end up winning the combat, but he passes the steadfast break test and even manages to reform amid defeat. But for me, I'm just amazed that they actually won the combat and held those bulls up for another turn. Over to the ogres, the Mournfang charge the rat ogre's flank as their only move. With no caster or shooters, we jump back into combat. We play out the farewell round for the gutter runners, who don't manage to wound, and the ogre attacks leave them with 9 6+ ward saves to make, but they aren't that lucky. In our big combat, the Mournfang puts 6 wounds and impact hits on the rat ogres. Then back to our challenge, where the Warlord is going first again, and the Tyrant is down to toughness 5 since the Toothcracker effect is worn off. The Warlord manages to get 2 more wounds through the Tyrant's ward save to put him down. The rat ogres put some wounds on the ogres, because the clan rats can't do squat themselves. The Mournfang kill the rat ogres down to the last, which leaves us with an interesting situation. The clan rats aren't in combat with the Mournfang, but they are part of a multi-combat, which the Mournfang are also in. So should the clan rats slide down towards the Mournfang and make contact with them when the rat ogres are dead? If they do, then the remaining character in the ogre block would end up outside of combat. As we played it, the Mournfang reformed, though we probably should have just slid the clan rats down. I lose the combat by a lot, but I'm holding steadfast once again and pass the break test. Moving on to the 5th turn, I have the Storm Vermin finally get themselves into combat, and the Doom Wheel tries to join in but just gets close enough to fry some Storm Vermin. We bypass the magic phase, and the Doom Wheel smokes a couple of Storm Vermin before we head back into combat again. The Warlord is feeling pretty good about himself, so he offers up another challenge that the unit champion accepts. The Warlord only manages a single wound, but the Bonebreaker has finally finished playing with himself and scores 2 wounds to finish it off. For normal attacks, the Storm Vermin have Death Frenzy and Hatred, and manage 10 wounds, with the clan rats doing their usual thing. The Ogres deal out 4 wounds total and aren't steadfast. They lose the combat and run, with the Standard Bearer and BSB dying as well, so only a lone Ogre is left to run and gets cut down in the pursuit. The clan rats and Storm Vermin overrun, and I'm pretty sure we had enough to make it into combat with the Mournfang. But I don't know what we were thinking by that point. I blame it on paint fumes. Anyways, the Mournfang charge the clan rats, but it should probably be the other way around, and the bulls charge the flank of the Storm Vermin. He fights the Mournfang battle first, and the Warlord manages the only wound for my side, and the clan rats lose 6 altogether. Here's another late-in-the-day oversight that I noticed while editing. I still have my whole front of 5 models. Since he is in 2-wide formation, I'm steadfast, but I rolled on the modified leadership and failed and got cut down with the Mournfang overrunning into the Storm Vermin. Then that battle happens with more impact hits and Death Frenzy and Hatred. The Storm Vermin fight a good fight, but end up down by enough to fail the break test and lose the Death Frenzy. The Mournfang pursue, but only end up with an 8-inch distance, and the speedy Storm Vermin manage to escape as the bulls reform towards the Doom Wheel. Going into our final turn, I have the Doom Wheel aim for the flank of the Mournfang, and it makes the distance. It's all riding on him now as the Storm Vermin fail to rally and continue on. Shooting becomes highly important, with the bolts from the Doom Wheel getting a strength 8 and killing off 2 of the Mournfang and putting 1 wound on the last. For the final fight, Mournfang has 2 wounds left, and I get d6 plus 1 impact hits, and I roll a 1. He takes a single wound, and for the normal attacks, it does 2d6 strength 2 hits, where I roll double 6s, and I only manage a single wound, and it gets saved. Fortunately, he only manages 2 wounds in return, and with my charge and flank, I end up winning the combat still. He fails the break test, and the Doom Wheel is able to finish him off as he runs. For the bottom of turn 6, the bulls charge the Storm Vermin, who have to flee and run another 9 inches, well out of range as we finally put this game out of its misery. Everybody has an off day, and I apparently put several of mine into this game. Just try to think of this one as a concentrated screw-up. Try and mix it with some water before you drink it. I myself needed a few shots of whiskey just to get through the editing process. Hope you are still watching after this one. Be sure and check back for new videos once I sober up. I'm sure I'm going to get comments and maybe even a few messages about this one. Till next time from Vidhammer, I'm going to bed.